All right, guys, welcome back to Downtown Rams. As always, I'm your host, Alexis Kraft, joined here with my co-host, Jake Ellenbogen, and we are coming to you after a Rams Week 4 loss in San Francisco against the 49ers, 24-9 last night. It was not a fun game. Let's just keep it real. It's a division rival. I think the 49ers are without a doubt our biggest division rival. There's a lot of bad energy between us two, between the Rams and the 49ers. We don't like each other. The fans have made it known. The players have made it known. It's just a really, really bitter rivalry, as you have in sports oftentimes. And it's a game they both wanted to win. It was a rematch of the NFC Championship game last year that the Rams won, leading us to a Super Bowl, which we also won. So it was a big game. It was prime time. It was the Rams' second prime time game of the year. And for the second time this year on prime time, we got dominated. And we pretty much came out and didn't look good for the vast majority of the game. And Jake and I have talked about this a lot off air. We've been interacting with people on social media. We have seen the outrage, quite frankly, the excuses, a little bit of denial. And guys, I made a tweet before I came on this podcast tonight. I said, listen, apologies, but not really, because I'm not sorry about it in advance. I'm going to keep it real. Quite frankly, I think that Rams fans right now need to take a reality check and understand that two things can be true. The Rams can have a bad game and get dominated and play bad, but also there's a long season left. And it doesn't mean that the Rams are the worst team in the NFL. It doesn't mean they're a bad team. It means that they have things they need to work on. Both things can be true. You can accept the fact that the Rams got embarrassed, which we did. We talked about the Bills game. I mean, it was pretty much the same sentiment, but also say this isn't a death sentence for the Rams. This isn't a death sentence for Matthew Stafford, like some people are saying. It's not a death sentence to the Raheem Morris, bend don't break defense. All of these things, in my opinion, are very dramatic and very over exaggerations to say. I think, yes, the Rams had a really bad game. And there are people who are in denial about that. I mean, it's a little embarrassing for Rams fans to kind of be going after 49ers fans right now on social media saying, oh, well, you didn't win when it mattered. Who cares? Guys, we won the Super Bowl last year. It's amazing. We're all so happy we won, but that's not what we're talking about anymore. This is a regular season game. This goes towards our record. It's a division rival, which means that somebody else in our division now has another win and we have a loss. Not good. And guys, like it was not a good look. I mean, the Rams didn't look good, but I think that two things can be true. We don't have to just go all in on one side or all in on the other side. Like I said, I think everybody's kind of freaking out or they're in denial, and we should be somewhere in the middle. We should, like Jake and I are going to talk about in this podcast, we're going to talk about what went wrong. We're going to talk about what needs improvement. There were some positives. I know it's hard to believe because watching this game, Jake, it was kind of like, where is the sunshine? Like, where is the silver lining here? This is just like a waking nightmare. When Coleman Shelton went out, I basically disassociated from reality. I was like, I'm not on this planet anymore. I don't want to be here. I've got to go to my happy place. I'm just going to pretend that this isn't happening. But there were some positives. And Jake is going to bring this up later, talking about the defense and some other things that we saw that were positive. We're going to talk about some of the talking points that Rams fans have had, and some people have been asking Jake and I questions about the game last night. We certainly want to answer those. But guys, this is just a real moment between all you guys are my homies and me, and Jake is going to speak. But what I'm going to go out with for this intro is the Rams have a lot they need to work on, but it's not a death sentence. The season is far from over and they can improve. But we're also not going to pretend like the Rams are playing the way that they need to be playing, because if the Rams keep playing at this rate, it's not going to be a good season for us. We aren't going to do well. And the odds of repeating as a Super Bowl champion are not going to be very high. So, Jake, I want to hear your thoughts on your brief overview of the game. And then we're going to start breaking down kind of the specifics of what went wrong, and maybe how to remedy that. And then we'll also obviously talk about the positives, because my God, we need to talk about some positives. I don't want to sit here and just talk about all that went wrong. Let's give us something to believe in, Jake.
Wow, that's a
What an
lot
intro.
to. Yeah, geez, I don't know how to match that. I mean, like there's this fire, then you're like, yeah, give us something to believe in. I'm like,
Well, I'm trying to keep it positive, but like you and I were saying, it's tough because it's kind of like, in order for us to have this conversation, like we have to keep it real. Like we can't just sit here and be like, oh, well, yeah, like we lost, but this good thing happened, and we're not going to talk about all this, and we're just going to pretend like this isn't a thing. Like you and I, we keep it very real when we talk to each other, and you and I were talking
yes,
before this podcast. And I want
we
people
do.
who listen to this podcast to also keep it real, like with themselves and with, Rams fans. Like we all have our opinions. I'm not saying you can't have your opinion, but like I think sometimes fans can kind of like make every excuse in the book before they'll just be like, we had a bad game. And then on the flip side of that, it's like fans will like freak out and be like, Matthew Stafford's washed and we're done with Stafford, and say just like all these like dramatic. So it's like two sides of like one extreme, where it really should be like we're all just in the middle with level heads being like, yeah, like that was really embarrassing. We played really bad. There's no excuse. We need to fix it. And then being like, we can fix it. We know that we can. We certainly have the talent to fix it. So you kind of have to have, I know it's hard when you're watching the game. Like last night, I said I disassociated from reality several times. I was not on the planet. I just was in denial. Like, I get it. Like, it was like a waking nightmare. So I get it's hard to have perspective when you're watching the game, even after the game. But like this morning, it's like we should all take a deep breath and be like, not fun. Not fun to lose the 49ers of all people. Wasn't a good look. Not fun to also do it on prime time. Keep in mind that's another thing, is everybody's watching Monday Night Football, but like it's gonna be fine. Like it's just we need to be calm. Which you and I think are calm now. We're recording this episode. So Jake, back to you.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, they lost 24-9 on Monday Night Football against the Niners in San Francisco, a place they have not won since 2018. The Rams scored in almost every quarter, but they were field goals, Alexis. They did not score touchdowns. And this is an offense coached by Sean McVay, who took a high school offense, as Todd Gurley called them in 2016, into one of the best offenses not even a full year later. It's been a struggle. As Sean McVay said it best during his press conference, it's been a struggle. It has not just been about Allen Robinson. He was asked about Allen Robinson and if it's been a struggle everywhere, and you have everybody gunning for you as the reigning Super Bowl champion. So obviously that's to be expected. But there's been a little extra added element. And I've seen a lot of 2019 in this season, and not necessarily saying they're the 2019 Rams. They won't make the playoffs. They'll go 9-7, 10-6, whatever. Or that's not even possible. So 9-8 or 10-7. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the injuries right off the rip. I mean, they've had so many. So you talk about they're not playing that well regardless. And now they're getting banged up. And first off, the Bills game, it was, well, the Bills, they lost to the Bills because they didn't play their starters in preseason. I don't feel like you can have it both ways. You can't say that you are absolutely against them playing their starters in preseason and then use that as an excuse as to why they're not fresh in the regular season. And that's where it started with the Bills. Next week is the Falcons. The Falcons, they come out and they look like they're back, right? I mean, you and I are watching. They added a little wrinkle to the offense. Ben Skoranek at fullback. The Falcons had no answer. They go up 28-3. And then what happens? I mean, they kind of disappear in the second half and they have to hang on for dear life, albeit there was a crazy circumstance. I mean, Cooper Kupp fumbles, you have a punt block, all that, whatever. But still, I mean, it happened. And then you look at week 3 and we're sitting here like, that was annoying. They won 20-12, but it was annoying. because they should have probably won by 20. And they left 3 touchdowns on the board. Akers fumble at the goal line. Allen Robinson drop. Cooper Kupp drop. And you look at these miscues and there's a pattern here, because then you go to the 49er game and you look at the missed throw to Tyler Higbee. Stafford missed him. Okay. I defend Stafford a lot because I feel like it's deserved. Like, I'm not going to sit here and defend him because I'm a stan. I'm going to sit here and defend him because I feel like that's what's right. Well, he missed Higbee. So let's get that out of the way. He also missed Darrell Henderson open on the left side. Another thing. But if you're sitting there and you're at home or you're listening to this, whatever, and you're blaming Stafford for the loss, entirely just him, and God forbid you're saying Jared Goff could have won this game, you're wrong, because Matthew Stafford was pressured 28 times. You don't need to know where that is since 2016, because I can tell you right now. It's the second most pressures allowed by any offensive line by the Rams since 2016. The most was 2019, that weird Tampa game, 55-40. Jared Goff was pressured 31 times in that game. And I mean, Stafford's been pressured a bunch before. You go back to Detroit. It's not anything new for him. But last year, he really wasn't until really the Niners game, week 18, when he was pressured 25 times. So you look at it and you're like, okay, so Stafford wasn't the best, right? Like he struggled a little bit. I thought he played well enough where if they could have given him a little bit more time, this is a different ball game. But like you said, the rug was pulled out from underneath them, basically, with Coleman Shelton going down. Now in steps the guy that, keep in mind, when we're talking in the terms of preseason, I'm very excited to see Cologne. I like Jeremiah Cologne. I felt like he should make the roster, the 53-man roster, as a backup. But he had to start. He had to basically come in and start the rest of the game. And he wasn't the worst I've ever seen at center. I mean, he didn't give up a sack, but he gave up 4 pressures. He was not the worst. But it doesn't even matter how well he played. Alexis, think about all the moving pieces all over the offensive line. And I'm actually going to throw this at you. Guess, and I don't expect you to actually know, because I wouldn't know off the top of my head, but guess how many games the starting opening day offensive line started before they got hurt. Any of them got hurt. Guess how many weeks in a row?
The starting offensive line last year?
Mm-hmm. The opening day offensive line, they went into week 1. How long did they continue to play together? Just take a guess.
12 weeks.
That would be amazing. No, it was 7 straight weeks, which is crazy, right? That's really good health for a position that's very prone to getting hurt. You're in the trenches, you get stepped on, you get rolled up on. They had 14 total starts together, including the playoffs, and they had 6 different combinations throughout the year in different offensive line starting combinations in a game. Okay? Now you look at this team. It's week 4, Alexis. They made it 1 game. The starting opening day offensive line made it 1 game, and they were done. Now we'll see, obviously Shelton's out 4 to 6 weeks and Allen could be back soon, but they made it 1 game. They've already had 4 different starting combinations and it's week 4. They had 6 last year. So on top of the fact that they are not playing that well even when they have pressure, as far as they get off to good starts, and then the second half, whatever reason, they can't get the ball in the end zone. On top of that, now you're dealing with some nasty injuries. There's a chance against Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, Dorrance Armstrong, and that tough Dallas defense, you're going to be starting Joe Noteboom at left tackle, who has not played his best football. Obviously, I think he can move past that. He's been playing next to Bobby Evans going like this past week. So he could get past that, but right now he's not playing great. Left guard, potentially, if David Edwards isn't cleared from the concussion protocol, you're looking at Ode Ibushi or Bobby Evans. I would play Ibushi. I know you would too, but who knows? Maybe they play Bobby Evans again. Center, Jeremiah Colon or veteran Matt Skur off the practice squad. Right guard, Alaric Jackson, probably the biggest bright spot, surprisingly, for the Rams. He was the third option after Ankrum went down, and they had to move Coleman Shelton to center. And then right tackle, Rob Havenstein, who's not played his best football. So there's an issue here. And the injuries are going to bring more to it, Alexis, but they got to start scoring points. They got to get their offense on track. And it can't just be the cop out of, well, they haven't gotten things together with Allen Robinson. Van Jefferson is out. Great. Van Jefferson will be back week 8, but you got to figure it out before Van Jefferson comes back because you got to win games. So, that's the thing. And for people that were wondering, hey, why did they go away from the fullback? Well, you can't have a fullback when the fullback's being pushed into the quarterback. And when you don't have the offensive line, you can't really have a lead blocker. They didn't run the ball for whatever reason. That's a whole different thing. I'll pass the baton to you before we get into the running backs because I could go all day about that. But just to throw these out here, these are PFF Rams pressures allowed statistics. Matthew Stafford has been pressured 61 times through the first 4 games of 2022. The only one who's been pressured more is Carson Wentz with 62. He was pressured 28 times, sacked 7 times. For basically the length of all of his sacks together was longer than half of a football field. That doesn't help you. That's not conducive to winning football. But you look at the pressures allowed. You have Alaric Jackson give up 3 pressures. Bobby Evans gave up 7 and a sack. Havenstein gave up 3, no sacks. Noteboom gave up 8, 2 sacks. Jeremiah Colon gave up 4, no sacks. Coleman Shelton, poor guy, was in there for 11 snaps, gave up 1 pressure, 1 sack, then got hurt. Henderson had 6 snaps in pass protection, 0 pressures. No idea why he's not in when they aren't getting the protection they need. He should have been there way more than 6 times. Higbee 4 times, 1 pressure. Akers 3 times, 1 pressure. Blanton twice, 0 pressure. Skoranek twice, 0 pressures. And Malcolm Brown 1 time, 0 pressures. So that is how everything looks as far as the pressures allowed and how they protected Stafford. For the most part, there's not a ton of sacks being given up by guys like Havenstein. Cologne didn't give up a sack, but that doesn't account for when you watch the tape, did these guys cause a sack, right? So that's not accounting for that. They gave the sack to Evans. They gave 2 to Noteboom. They gave 1 to Shelton, and that was that. So, all in all, I mean, I don't really know what you would have expected behind an offensive line that had the rug pulled out from under them. But next time, play Ode Ibushi at left guard. And I would probably use more Darrell Henderson in the passing game. I'd use him in pass pro. And I would run the ball more because say what you will about this offensive line, Alexis, it was not great, but you can't just not run the ball. 3.9 yards per carry for Darrell Henderson on 7 carries is just not acceptable. You should have ran the ball more. You should have given him more carries. He can't get into a rhythm if he's running once a quarter. So I just think right now the run game has to be managed better. And I just think right now, I understand you're going to get those pressures because you have all these new guys in an offensive line. I get that. But there are ways to go about it. And basically leaning on Kupp the way you did. I think I saw a stat. They're 1-5 when Kupp has more than 18 targets in a game. That's crazy. You kind of telegraph it for the defense. That's why Hufanga picked it off, because that play call was terrible. Everyone knew that he was going to Cooper Kupp. But sorry, that was a rambling rant. But my point basically is that they have talent. They're banged up, but there's a fine line, like you kind of mentioned. There's a fine line between being injured, but also like you're struggling when you're healthy. And this offense was never clicking before they got hurt.
Well, and here's the thing with like the offensive line. The offensive line, yes, obviously that is a huge problem for the Rams. It's a top problem for them, I think. I mean, it's just a nightmare. Granted, I think the 49ers have one of the best defensive fronts in the league. I really think that. I said on the last episode, I was more nervous about the 49ers defensive front and linebacking core than I was their secondary. I didn't think we were going to be able to run the ball. And we weren't. I mean, was that I think that was probably a combo of the offensive line and the defensive front. I think it was more about the 49ers defense, but like I thought, we did not do well running the ball. But again, I think the Rams issues don't just stem from the struggling offensive line. I think there's a lot of issues going on. And I want to talk about it. I mean, what was I going to touch on first? So here's the thing. Okay, so the Cooper Cup thing, like you said, I think there is a problem this season of teams understanding that Matthew Stafford is 99% of the time going to target Cooper Cup. Okay, one, based on Cooper Cup's season last season, everybody already knows what he can do. They know he's a freak. They know that he's pretty much unguardable. But looking at this game in particular, receptions, Cooper Cup, 14 receptions. Next is Tyler Higbee with 10, and next is Henderson with 3. So there's a huge disparity on, where the receptions are going. Now, Tyler Higbee is getting more involved, and I love that. I think Tyler Higbee's really underrated. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. But sadly, I think the reason he's getting more involved is because he's one of 2 guys that Stafford wants to throw to for whatever reason. Now, here's the thing with the Allen Robinson deal. It's week 4. I'm pretty much over making excuses for the fact that they just haven't established a connection yet. And even if that's the case, then Stafford needs to get over it. You need to target the guy. If you start targeting him and he is unable to make catches, which he did have a few plays where he was targeted, and I felt that was more on Stafford, overthrew him, I think, twice against the 49ers. I'd have to go back and look at that number. That's a separate story. But we can't just sit here, guys, and be like, oh, well, Stafford just doesn't have that connection with Robinson yet. Well, it's week 4, so he better find it. I mean, you can't keep targeting Cooper Cup. You can't, Tyler Higbee, sure, but that's 2 guys. The whole reason that the Rams offense has been successful is because you have a multitude of guys that you can throw to. Now, losing Odell Beckham Jr., not having him this year, I think is really hurt. Obviously, him and Stafford made a connection right away. So it's kind of crazy that people want to pretend that he can't do that with Allen Robinson right away, right? I mean, Odell Beckham came in mid-season last season, and Stafford and him absolutely lit it up. Skoranek, I think, is slowly starting to build his way up. I mean, he's obviously being used kind of in a Swiss Army knife way. I mean, he's playing fullback, but he has made good catches. I know that everybody, for some reason, likes to hate on Ben Skoranek, but he has made good catches, and he's actually been pretty reliable this season. Tutu Atwell didn't even dress last night. He was a healthy scratch. And I'm going to be honest, I mean, because we're talking about receivers here, McVay's excuse of, oh, well, he just didn't fit our game plan that night, that's still not acceptable to me. I mean, you have a 2nd round draft pick and you're not going to dress him for a game. Maybe he's not part of your draft, your game plan. Fine, don't use him a lot, but he's not even dressed. Like, you're not even going to throw him in there just for the hell of it. It makes no sense to me. So you've got Atwell, who just wasn't even playing, healthy scratch. So basically, you've got Kupp, Allen Robinson, Ben Skoranek, and Tyler Higbee. You have 4 guys, other than Henderson, who, he's technically a running back, but I mean, he was 3rd in receptions last night. But looking at your actual receivers, why is Cooper Kupp and Tyler Higbee dominating it, but it's really Cooper Kupp. Kendall Blanton got in there, I think, for a few plays. I do think that Blanton has proven himself to be pretty reliable. Did we see anybody else last night? Am I drawing a blank?
I mean, Brandon Powell, they had one of the best play designs I've seen all season, and then they didn't go back to him. And I'm like,
he had
you have a hard
most
time
rushing yards last night, by the way. Brandon Powell with 11. That was the biggest. He had the most. Okay, not overall rushing yards.
I see what you're saying.
That was the biggest play. Sorry.
The biggest, yeah, the biggest.
He had the biggest rush of the night.
I mean, I believe it, because it's like the Niners had no answer for that. And when you have a guy in Powell who can read blocks, can read leverage, from being a punt and kick returner, his whole career, even going back to Florida. I mean, he's going to thrive in those roles because at that point he's just a ball carrier, and they got to find a way to get him the ball more. It's simply put. And honestly, I'm at the point here where, I do get the whole Lance McCutcheon is a little raw and all that. I get that, right? But you definitely need a field stretcher. And I'm not saying Lance McCutcheon is super fast, but I think, he would command some attention if you started using him over the top, maybe open up stuff underneath. I don't know. I feel like they could start using him now. Like, now that Tutu was inactive, that tells me that they felt like they would have no chance at all to get the ball down the field, which fine, that totally makes sense. But there's got to be somebody stretching the field to open up the underneath routes. Because right now, no one is getting separation. Kupp had guys glued to him, and he was just still making the plays. But, I mean, for the most part, these guys are not creating separation, and it's because they can't really stretch out the field. It's like, think about in basketball, right? You want to spread out your offense. And if you don't have, if you have that stretch four, now all of a sudden, that defender has to start paying attention to that power forward that can shoot threes. It opens up everything. Now I can go and attack the paint. It's the same thing with the stretch, the stretch guy, in football, the stretch receiver, field stretcher. A deep threat like that can go down the field opens up the middle, because now teams are like, oh, well, I have to play too high safety. You can't cheat. You can't put a guy in the box now and try to take away, those underneath routes. And that is important. So when you don't have a Van Jefferson or, OBJ or Deshaun Jackson or whoever, now all of a sudden you become easy to kind of telegraph on how to, we can stop you. Allen Robinson could be that, but they do not use him the way they should. I will not stop saying that. They do not use Allen Robinson the way they should use Allen Robinson. I have not been impressed with it. I think, it's not a coaching thing. I'm not done with Sean McVay. But I think that there needs to be more creativity. And it's like, the first 15 plays of the game, Alexis, that's where the creativity is. There needs to be more on the fly creativity, more adjustments being made, because the opening script of the game, they look pretty good, right? I mean, I thought they looked good. They moved the ball at will. And of course they were stopped, for the field goal, but they looked pretty good on that drive. That was a scripted drive. So it's not that they didn't move the ball when it wasn't a scripted drive, but I do have my concerns. Because until Van Jefferson comes back, I still don't think, and I'm not saying I give them the excuse. There's really no excuse. They should still be able to find a way. But until he comes back, they're going to be a very non-explosive offense until he comes back. Then I think things will start to move. But this is one of the worst explosive teams in the NFL, and I have never seen a Sean McVay offense not explosive. Even Jared Goff in 2019, who had fallen off a cliff, that offense was still explosive. This is not an explosive offense right now. It's very underneath heavy.
It's not. It's a little concerning, honestly, because here's part of what made the Rams successful was kind of how they could diversify their options on offense.
100%.
They didn't need. Now, Kupp is amazing and he's great, but he alone, as we have seen, is not going to lead the Rams back to quite the playoffs. I mean, he can't do it alone. They have to have some other options. And like I said, they need to figure it out with Allen Robinson. I mean, Stafford, McVay, and Robinson, I'm sure they understand hopefully they understand what they need to do, and they need to work it out, because you've got to get somebody involved. Van Jefferson isn't back until week 8. Skowronek, maybe it's Skowronek. Maybe they're like, we need to just give him way more targets. We need to open him up. I mean, he's been pretty consistent. I know a lot of people, are like, oh, well, he dropped the ball or whatever. But I'll be honest with you, most of the time that Skowronek hasn't made a catch, it's been on Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford has overthrown him. I could think of at least 4 separate occasions this season alone, or wasn't even close to Skowronek. Now, I do think he still is a little raw. I'm not saying that he's for sure the answer, but try something. At this point, I mean, you're 4 weeks in, you're 2-2, and the 2 games that you've won, weren't great. I mean, you won them. A win is a win, but they weren't very solid. I mean, they were like, it was like painful to watch, as we all know as fans, like against the Atlanta Falcons, who are one of the worst teams in the NFL. So listen, something's got to give. You've got to change the offense. You've got to get back to the run game. I'm so furious Kyron Williams isn't out there. You all know me. You all know how much I love Kyron Williams, but he's exactly kind of what the Rams need right now at running back, because he can pretty much do everything. And he's really good in pass pro. So you talk about a struggling offensive line. Imagine if you had Kyron Williams out there, but he's not going to be back for a while because he got hurt on special teams, which I still can't believe. We won't get into that. But Jake,
God,
let's
never
talk about
return
the
a
defense
kickoff.
now.
There's no point.
Yeah, let's talk about the defense now, which is a point of contention, I know, among Rams fans and the bend don't break. But Jake, as I was telling you, so here's the thing, and I was telling you this before we recorded my thoughts on this. Like, bend don't break is infuriating to watch, but it does theoretically kind of work. Like, it's not perfect, and there are a lot of times where I'm not sure it's the best defense to run, but it is what it is. The first two touchdowns of the game, right, for the 49ers had nothing to do with bend don't break. Absolutely zero. The Jeff Wilson rush and the Debo Samuel like catch / rush had nothing to do with bend don't break. Guys, those touchdowns were at the fault of our defense just not being able to tackle. It's almost more concerning.
Bobby Wagner didn't fill the gap assignment on the Jeff Wilson one. They held him to 17 carries for 42 yards, and regardless of, if you take away that touchdown, I mean, he didn't do well. Like, the Rams shut down their run game. That's why it was so infuriating. They did a nice job except for that one freaking run. And then, you look at the two splash plays, actually three splash plays. You had the Debo Samuel one, then you had another Debo Samuel one, and then you had the use check one. Almost bothers me more than any of them because nobody was on that side of the field. It was like they weren't even like aware, like they throw to use check. Like, oh my God.
That one, yeah. Well, I mean, the two ones though. So so it's tough because it's like the bend don't break. I'm not 150% sold on bend don't break. My issue specifically though last night was the I mean, the Debo Samuel thing, like everyone's annoyed that Debo's like laughing about that, but let him. I mean, it was just atrocious. I mean, you had at least 3 guys attempt to tackle him and just couldn't do it. And then you had another 3 guys that he evaded quite easily. That had nothing to do with the scheme. That was just a great play by Debo and really, really poor play by the Rams defense. And Jake, last night, our defense didn't get a sack or an interception.
Only 5 pressures on Garoppolo. I mean, you got to be able to pressure him more.
But here's the thing. And I said this in our last episode, I actually kind of like their offensive line. I do think they have a very good offensive line. I don't think it's an excuse. I still think they come away with no sacks, no interceptions, and only 5 pressures is not a good look. It's just not, especially from a defense that has all the stars that we do. So I'm not happy with it. But again, it's not like, and I think we were going up against a pretty solid offensive line. So I'll give the 49ers credit there, give the Rams defense a break a little bit. But defensively, guys, last night, I'm not so sure that it was our scheme that derailed us. I think it was our defense just didn't play well. And Jake, I want to hear your thoughts kind of on that. I know you kind of gave your thoughts a little bit on the first 2 touchdowns, but as a whole, I mean, what do you think it was that kind of caused our defense to fall apart? Because there was a lot of moments last night where it was just like, what is going on? Like, why do they look so confused? Why are the 49ers running all over them? What do you think it was?
See, I thought they actually played pretty well aside from a couple plays. That's the thing that was so frustrating. It's like when you play a really good game and then it's just a couple of those plays that come back to bite you. Look, there was a really good example of this. You had George Kittle catch a pass in the flat, okay? And Grant Haley comes up to George Kittle and he does something that I mean, he's like my height. And he does something that I never see defensive backs do except for Ramsey. Tries to wrap up, right? He tries to wrap up Kittle. He stands his ground, takes great form, and attacks Kittle. Now, obviously, Alexis, Grant Haley is not tackling George Kittle 1v1, but this is why you don't ankle bite. And what I mean by ankle bite is swipe at the legs, try to dive into their legs, things like that. Really like quick ways to just completely get like knocked off the TV and have the guy run for 6. That play I keep going back to in particular because when you look at when Grant Haley went one-on-one with Kittle, what did that do? It slowed down Kittle. So guys came over and made the gang tackle. Okay, so that one play with Debo, you had Debo catch the ball. You had Darion Kendrick, who's this close, man. If he played the ball a little bit better and it was thrown a little bit lower, it's a pick 6. But anyway, so he misses the ball and it goes into Debo's hands. Debo has his back toward the end zone and he's got a long way to go. I think he ran for 55 yards. Taylor Rapp has zero excuse not to make that tackle. Zero. Literally zero. I mean, the whole thing about Taylor Rapp coming out of Washington is that he operated so well around the secondary or so well around the line of scrimmage that he was so great against the run, could make tackles. He's not great in coverage. Well, if you can't tackle and you're not great in coverage, then why are you out there? I mean, really, I'm just being honest. I like him and I want him to have success, but that was just not acceptable. Then the Jalen Ramsey one. Jalen Ramsey is the man that actually tackles. Like, he's the corner that tackles. He's made that like his identity. He swipes at the legs of Debo. So Debo scores on that touchdown, and there were all sorts of bad angles and all that. I need the play to be shown right now to see all the bad angles that everyone was taking. But no, I mean, I agree with you. And the Rams are going to be without Jordan Fuller for 2 to 4 weeks. So there is a good chance, because it's 2 to 4 weeks, that if he's ready, I'm not saying I know anything about this, but you could start to see guys like Quentin Lake maybe come off the PUP list. You could see Russ Yeast get an opportunity. You could see Terrell Burgess continue to get opportunities. The Rams have shown they don't care. They're going to give these guys a shot. I mean, just look at Rochelle, 6th round pick this year, and he started back-to-back games. Grant Haley off the practice squad. Come on down. You're our nickel corner. They don't care. They're going to give these guys an opportunity. But this is, I don't want to say a significant loss, but it sucks, and it definitely sucks for him. I'm a fan of Jordan Fuller. I was very concerned because the nature of the break, which by the way wouldn't have happened if I think it was Mike McGlinchey just basically like sat on his leg, in week 18. So the nature of that break really worried me long term. So I am concerned by that. But look, the defense, they have injuries. They're not making any excuses. They gave up 17. We can sit here and be super critical about them. And honestly, those few plays, you should be. And they absolutely should get more pressure. But I thought they played well enough to win this game. And going back to what you were saying about the bend don't break, it does theoretically work. But keep in mind why they're running it. They're running it because they're expected to score 30 a game. They're running it for the offense that was top 3 in explosive plays last year. And they assumed, Matthew Stafford going into year 2 in this offense will be better. Going out and getting Allen Robinson will be better. Van Jefferson gets hurt, so that changes some things. And honestly, they've had some injuries. The offense is not the offense that you need when you're running this bend don't break. And the thing that really sucks about last night, Alexis, is that no one's talking about this. Sean McVay, despite having, like I said, 2 out of 5 starting offensive linemen, all those injuries, yada, yada, and not having any run game, as much as I want to complain, and I am complaining because they should run the ball more, but they dominated in time of possession. How did that even happen? How did they dominate the game in time of possession? They had 34 minutes, Alexis, 34. They dominated in time of possession. if they had capitalized on those touchdowns, they would have won this game. If they hit all 3 of those touchdowns instead of field goals, they would have won this game. Last year, maybe it's a different story. The offense was more explosive. Talk about lack of explosive plays. I think that's a big deal. But the defense, the reason, like we talk about, the reason they do the bend don't break is because if you do the bend don't break and you hold the field goals, and on the other side you're scoring touchdowns for the offense, guess what? It's a trade, man. You'll trade 3 while you score 7 all game long, because there is no way, no matter what, there's no rule in mathematics that would ever mean that if you scored 7 on every play, every drive, and then the other team scored 3, that the team that was scoring 3 every time would win. There's no way. And that is why they run the bend don't break. But the problem right now, Alexis, is that they're not scoring touchdowns. And teams are scoring touchdowns on the bend don't break. And even when they hold them to field goals, the Rams are just matching them. Like that touchdown to start the game for the Niners was following a drive in which the Rams had a better drive than the Niners. They got stalled, but better fully calculated drive the Rams had. Then you look again, another drive stalls. 49ers get another explosive play. So then what? It's 14-6. And then you look, the Rams score. Now it's 14-9 in the third quarter. You hold the Niners to 0 points in the third. Okay. And then you give up 10 in the fourth. That was the issue. And, obviously the interception hurt, the fumble hurt, but the game was over, before the fumble. But there's so many different things. It's frustrating because so far all I've seen is that Raheem Morris's defense would work if this offense could get its head out of its what. And right now, we've seen one explosive game, and it was 2 quarters against the Falcons. This team has not been great in the fourth quarter. This team has not been great in the third quarter. The second half has posed a problem for the Rams. And until they figure that out, they're going to be in every game, whether they're way better, whether they have 10 more wins than the other opponent, whether the other opponent doesn't have their entire team. They're going to be in every single game until they can figure out how to turn those field goals into touchdowns. And that is the name of the game, because the defense, I think, is still going to continue to do what they did against the Niners. They're going to hold teams to field goals. They'll give up some of those touchdowns, sure, but you give up 17 points, you should win every game with the talent the Rams have. And as much as you want to say, obviously the offensive line, regardless if the offensive line was healthy or not, the Rams have just shown you, even when they are somewhat healthy, they're just not getting these things together. Again, dropped Kupp touchdown last week, dropped Allen Robinson touchdown point blank last week, fumbled, carry by Cam Akers at the goal line last week. For the most part, the offensive line, they had Edwards, they had Noteboom, they had Shelton, they had Jackson, and they had Havenstein. So that was their offensive line. Jackson has made you better, so I wouldn't necessarily, call him a downgrade. So, I don't know. That's where I'm at this point, Alexis. I think, definitely am not against the bend don't break. It's frustrating, yes, but I'm against, the idea of, hey, look, if the Rams go another week where they're not scoring touchdowns and we're kicking another bunch of field goals and they kick, say, 4 and they win the game or lose it, but they only score 12 points, the bend don't break might have to go, because at that point, your offense isn't doing enough. And at that point, you have to start playing aggressive, because if the offense isn't scoring points and you're holding them to field goals, they're still putting points on the board. And that's the problem. So,
well, yeah, kind of to wrap it up here, we said last week the Rams needed to make a statement game. We were like, the Rams need to have a statement game. And they kind of did, but the wrong kind of statement.
Yeah.
Right? The second primetime game for the reigning Super Bowl champions. And they got, I don't want to use the word embarrassed, but quite frankly, I think they did. I think here's the problem with the Rams is they have all the talent in the world, but then you're putting them on the primetime stage and they're just like not functioning. So I do think they can figure it out. I think they've been in ruts before. I'm not concerned, but they have to do something. They can't keep doing what they're doing. So Whether that's changing the way they're operating on offense, maybe it ends up having to be, like you said, getting rid of the bend don't break because the offense just isn't producing. Something has to happen because what they're doing right now is they're playing very stale. They're playing super predictable, and it's not going to win games. I mean, I'm surprised. Like I said, the two wins that they've had were not great. I mean, they won the game. That's what matters. A win is a win. But it's concerning because in my mind, if you're winning barely like that, then you get into these other games where you're playing better teams and then you can't beat them. So we have to see. But guys, I know that this week was exactly the opposite of what we all wanted to happen on Niners week.
Could say that.
It was basically just like a nightmare. What you can against, I mean, the 49ers.
Did you see my tweet? I was like, oh, that should have been an interception, and they get a 55-yard touchdown out of it. This was Niners week. It just felt like Niners week. It felt like everything that you didn't want to happen happened, and I don't know. I felt right at home. Felt like last year and the year before and the year before that.
We're gonna move on, guys. You know, that's it. We will be back, obviously, with a preview episode for Dallas. But my parting words is, guys, don't freak out, but also just keep it real. I mean, like I said, two things can be true. We don't have to jump to all these extremes. We can be somewhere in the middle and just acknowledge that Rams had a bad game. It happens. It's probably will happen again at some point in the season. It's very rare for a team to make it through an entire season without having a bad game. So that's it. We're moving on. We'll see the Niners again later this season. We'll get
very soon, actually. I think it's at the end of October.
So we'll get a chance to redeem ourselves.
Yeah, it's crazy.
In a few weeks. But guys, as always, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe. You can follow us on social media at Downtown Rams. You can follow me on Twitter at the Alexis Kraft, and you can follow Jake at JKBogan. And guys, we'll be back. But until then, stay safe, take care, and go Rams.
If you haven't joined Prize Picks yet, you need to do it this season. Prize Picks allows you to pick up to 5 player props, and it gives you the option to 10x your winnings. Look at this right now. Tom Brady right now, for a limited time only, is a free square, because unless he gets hurt, he is going to be getting that 0.5. I'm going to select Tom Brady. I'm going to select Josh Allen going 275.5. Matthew Stafford going 265.5. We'll just throw Lamar Jackson in here, and let's just throw Justin Fields gets more than 191.5. So what you do here, you put more, or less if you believe, Lamar Jackson gets less than that. And there you go, 10x your winnings if this pays out. You will actually get paid out even if you only hit 3 of them. You'll get 0.4 times your money back. You'll get 2 times. You'll double your money if you get at least 4 out of 5. Deposit today by using our promo code DTRAMS, and you'll get up to a $100 bonus match.